an apple, then let me take a bite. If they say why.
Hi there. You're listening to WBCA 102.9, Boston's community radio station. I'm Kyla-Journey and you're listening to Word to Us, amplifying Black women's voices on WBCA 102.9. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Word to Us, a podcast by a Black first-gen female student for Black first-gen female students. My name is Kyla-Journey and I'll be the host of this series. Last season, I focused on the taboo topics that weren't talked about within the Black community and households. This season, I want to branch out on my topics to create a community that centers Black women's voices and opinions. Although I created this podcast for Black first-gen female students, that doesn't mean they're the only ones who can listen to this podcast. They were my original focus because I wanted a community that caters to the intersection of my identities, and I wanted to carve out a space catered to Black women created by one. The topics I plan on covering with this series can apply to any and everyone. All right. Hi, everyone. So this is going to be the second episode of my summer season of Word to Us. This episode is going to be talking about being put in a box. And what I mean by that is, let's say you're someone who... Actually, no. Let's start from the top. So in my personal experience, there has always been this sort of middle gray space that I've been a part of. It's either you're too Black to be in white spaces or you're too white to be in Black spaces. And I wanted to see how I could talk about this and bring attention to what it means to float in this sort of in-between and how other people might be feeling, if they have similar experiences, if it's something that they didn't realize that they were going through, but they have been going through, and just some things like that. So to get things started, I do have a couple of things that I wanted to bring up. First of all, I wanted to talk about the concept of alienation and the fact of being subjected to being put in a box. So, like I said before, I identify being put in a box as you're too Black to be around white people and not Black enough to be around Black people comfortably. I feel like there's always that sort of in between that you feel when you're first getting into a space, and you might not know everyone that's there, or you might not know anyone that's there, and you're still trying to adjust and see who's around you, the things that they might, be talking about or be doing, or things in that nature. So I think that in this case, for myself, I went to a predominantly Black elementary and middle school. And then as I grew up and started going into my high school and into college, I transitioned from a predominantly Black space into a predominantly white space. And although I knew I was a young Black woman in Boston, it didn't necessarily dawn on me how Black I could be in a predominantly white space, just because that was an area that I didn't normally frequent. So I don't want to get too much into that because I do have an episode dedicated just to my experience in high school, but I will say that it was definitely an experience. I will say that for sure. But in terms of, treading that middle gray area, there are just certain things I wasn't privy to until I got a little bit older. Because obviously when you're younger, you're like, oh, you might reflect on some experiences and be like, oh, that was a microaggression, or, oh, that was just, personally, I think there's a difference between a microaggression and just a straight up aggression, or just something that's just racially charged. But again, conversation for a different day, or maybe later on in this episode. But I have some experiences of some people that I know that felt that they were very predominantly othered in a space, and I just wanted to bring some attention to that. So the first one, someone I know from high school said, being the only Black girl in any advanced math class. Personally, I wasn't in too many advanced math classes. I was always more in the advanced English courses. But even in the advanced English classes, those were also still predominantly white. And with this person, because we went to the same high school, the high school in and of itself is majority white, majority Asian. So when you're sitting in these classrooms and you're looking around, especially when it comes to English classes, and you're reading these books by authors who are either talking about times when racial crimes were at a high and racism is very prevalent in the books and how the characters are written, it's sort of hard to want to raise your hand and speak from experience. But being in an advanced math class, it's also a male dominated space, and this person is another Black young woman, so definitely completely 1000% understand. The next person is someone I know from college, Malik. He actually just graduated, and we met because we were both in the Rebirth Project, which is the student-run journalism publication that I am the co-editor of, and or excuse me, not co-editor, the editor-in-chief of actually this year, because Manasa also graduated. Manasa and Malik, shout out to you guys. You guys are awesome. Thank you for all your support, and congratulations on graduating. But all three of us are journalism majors. Manasa was on the PR track, and Malik was doing sports concentration, then switched to general. But they said, I have a lot of experience with being two Black and white spaces or two white and Black spaces because they're biracial, and being told I don't talk Black enough and you're just white with Black people hair, and also not being invited to friends' family parties because I would have been the only Black person, are just a few of my experiences. And in terms of being biracial, this is not something that is my story, but my best friend and my partner are both biracial. And there are just some things, like when you look at them, you're like, oh, like I know you're Black, but not everyone, especially if you're not close to them, you wouldn't know that like their dad is white. So when it comes to people sharing their experience about being either biracial or multiracial or coming from a multi-ethnic home, I tend to listen more than I speak, just because I know that that's not my experience. But from the perspective of being told you don't talk quote unquote Black enough when you're in Black spaces, I think that's something that needs to be a little bit more dug into within the Black community, because I personally believe that ignorance and a lack of knowledge is a choice. You choose. There are some people who are willfully ignorant, and I think there are other people who just don't know. And I think when you are stuck in your ways and you know what you know and you know that you know it, I think it can be a little bit hard to get out of that. And when someone tries to tell you how to change or improve for the better, because you may have the mindset of, oh, but this is what I've always known, how could this not be right? I think some people are very stuck in that. And when it comes to not talking Black enough, I think that we need to bring back using context clues when we're talking, like just common reading and listening comprehension skills, and also just understanding that there are other words that you can use to replace the quote unquote simpler ones that you may be using in your sentences. Like, I'm not saying you need to throw out SAT vocabulary words, but I think in general there are just certain things that would make having conversations a lot more interesting. And I think that Black people have their own language and their own way of communicating, and there are just certain phrases that like only another Black person would understand. Like the phrase "you good" could be used in multiple different areas and contexts, and that's simply for the fact of you can ask someone "you good" as in like, do you need help? You can ask someone "you good" as in, oh, like, you know what's going on, is there a problem? You can ask someone "you good" like they were coughing really hard, you know what I mean? So I think that there's a beauty in the Black community among our language, but I also think that being told you don't talk Black enough, being Black is a wide-ranging experience, and I think honestly that phrase is BS, but yeah. Yeah. The next person is talking about their experience. I also know them from high school. This is from Cicero. I don't know if this counts, but when Trump, Vance, and Musk were spreading those baseless conspiracy theories about Haitians eating cats and dogs, it was jarring to see some of the responses on social media. While a lot of people, including Haitian content creators that I follow, were poking fun at how crazy that sounds, there were some who would make videos further pushing this idea that Haitians are nothing but savages who don't know how to act civilized. Even though I always knew anti-Haitian sentiments existed in certain spaces, I did not realize how prevalent it still was, even among Black people that aren't Dominicans. With Trump being president, the rhetoric has only gotten worse to where there was even a Democratic politician who tried using anti-Haitian rhetoric to win an election. Seeing how some parts of social media has painted Haitians has changed the way I view myself in terms of how much of my identity I want to showcase. Cicero. As someone who doesn't know much about their ethnicity and where their family's from, like I know I'm Black, I know I'm what would be considered African American. I consider myself Black, not African American, even though I know some people use the terms interchangeably, but it's just because I don't know where I'm from. Like I don't know if I'm from an island or from a country in Africa. So I just consider myself Black, but in terms of knowing whether I'm like, Haitian or Dominican or Puerto Rican and Black or, from Alabama, just stuff like that. But I know on my mom's side, I'm Bayesian, so somewhere from the Bahamas. And on my dad's side, the furthest back we go is Alabama. So I figure Africa to Alabama, Alabama to Pennsylvania. And then my dad went from Pennsylvania to here in Boston. But I think that there are a lot of things that are brought up within the politic world, if that phrase even makes sense. I think that there are a lot of things within the politic world where a lot of people grew up being exposed to hate, being taught to hate, and then they take that hate and apply it to any and every possible environment they could think of. And I also think another thing too, this is a case of willful ignorance. There's no way in the world that you go, yes, my ideas are right. Well, some people go, yes, my ideas are right. I never want to change my ideas because why would I ever do that when I know that this is, correct? So I just think that knowing who our president is and knowing what a majority, not all Americans, but I would say what some of the people who have the most political power in the United States believe. I think that the anti-immigrant, anti-Haitian, basically anyone who's not a white man, maybe even a white woman, but I think mostly white man. I just believe that they're not being prioritized. They're not being looked at as worthy of having policies that are written to protect them. And with that being said, we're going to take a quick break and we're going to come back and continue talking about others' experiences of being put in a box. You're listening to Word to Us, amplifying Black women's voices on WBCA 102.9, Boston's community radio station.
Why do I pick up my phone every time that you call? Why do I feel this way? Why do I feel this? I'm in my feelings. Why do I let you give me half and give you my all? Why do I feel this way? Why do I feel this? I'm in my feelings.
Hi everyone, welcome back. You're listening to Word to Us on WBCA 102.9, Boston's community radio station. I'm Kyla-Journey and I've just been talking about some of the experiences of friends, people that I know, people that have responded to the question of what is their experience of being considered too black to be in white spaces or too white to be in black spaces. And the reason I use black and white is because with Word to Us and its purpose, I want to amplify black women's voices, but also the black community. And I know that the black community is a big community filled with people that have multi-ethnic, multicultural backgrounds. And I want to preface that if anyone else has any other experiences, I'm open to sharing them if you would like. If there is something that really sticks out to you or something that you know is not just within the black community, but also within other communities of color. I know that there are some shared experiences. But with that being said, I'm going to continue reading from this experience list. The next person is my nail tech and also one of my good friends, and she said any advanced work classes at my majority white and Asian school. She went to the Murphy in Boston, and yeah, to connect with what the first person, my first friend from high school, said, there are just a lot of men, a lot of non-black men in any sort of advanced class, and I don't think that that's an intelligence thing. I think that there's some sort of educational bias that not a lot of teachers and professors know that they have, where they tend to look at the male students first and for longer before their female students, just because they're like, oh well, he's excelling, and it's like your female students are also excelling, but you're just not paying them as much attention just because, you're like, oh, well, that's what they do. They work hard. And it's like, yeah, but she also deserves to be put in a class where if she wants to be more challenged, she can be more challenged. The next one comes from one of my best and closest friends, Storm. She went to a restaurant called 99 and felt like they were the only black person there. And to preface, Storm, please don't kill me for telling this story, but just bear with me. When they were in the store, when they were in the restaurant, they did go in and they were with their partner. And when they went to go sit down, they tripped on the way to their seat. They didn't fall, they just tripped. But while they were getting their bearings and stuff, they just went to the bathroom. And I remember them messaging me and they were just like, I'm literally the only black person in here and I'm going to hide out in this bathroom for 10 minutes until this wave of embarrassment washes over me. And I was like, dude, there's no way. And they were like, yeah, way. But I think a lot of the time when, from my experience, just being a black person, when I'm in public, I think I shop a very specific way just because of how some store owners, or just from the experiences of people I know or people around me, tend to act. And I think that sometimes there are other things that, me as a person, I'm like, okay, how can I, protect myself and make sure that, I make it in and out of the store safely. And this is something I think about quite often. It's literally like, okay, I'm going in the store to get what I need. Don't linger too long. Don't open and shut too many doors. And I also am someone who is quite anxious. So I would say this is a bit of anxiousness and anxiety mixed with survival instincts, mixed with what I would consider common sense. But I'm just like, okay, I know what I need when I go in the store. Don't wander for too long. Don't look at something for too long. Don't go to a section with expensive things if you don't need anything from over there. And with that being said, when I go into a restaurant, I don't think the same way, but I know it's like, okay, I order a drink first. Then I look at the menu and figure out what I want to eat. And then I eat, 30 minutes to an hour. After that, I'm just like, why are we still here? Especially if it's a smaller party. I'm just like, we can, continue this conversation somewhere else. I don't want to take up someone else's time. I don't want to take up a table. I don't want to cause too many the the experience of my parents, but also from the understanding that I know not everyone wants me to be around or be in their space simply because of the color of my skin. And I'm not assuming that everyone is like this, but I know for a good majority, not a good majority of people, that's also not the correct statement, but I know that there are some people who literally would feel a type of way seeing me in an establishment purely because of the color of my skin. So to combat that, I'm just very cautious and aware of my surroundings and where I'm at. Moving forward, the next experience is someone I know also from high school, maybe 2 or 3 years behind me. Trigger warning. As crazy and weird as it sounds, when I was out on the streets, homeless and using, I felt like I was too privileged and lived too much of a good life to be out there. And people looked at me like I didn't really belong out there, but I was, which felt weird. Also, in terms of using, people were telling me I was forcing it and doing too much, and I didn't really understand because we were all in the same boat, homeless and using drugs. What am I getting shamed for? Doing more or doing in quote more or using in quote too hard. And this is also something I thank them for telling me, because the way that there are some people who let me start at the beginning. There are certain circumstances that may or may not prevent or push someone to start using, but that's never an excuse to blame them or to make them feel less than, because we are all human. We all make mistakes, and sometimes people have vices, and people also have things that they turn to try and heal a part of themselves. And I think in terms of the language that we use when referring to people who are unhoused or people who are using, I think we have to give them the grace and the understanding that they are still a human being. They're just going through a really tough time, and they literally just need support. Sometimes they need support. They need someone to talk to. They need someone to hear them out and understand where they're coming from, and also to understand what their goals are and where they want to go and what they want to do in life. But when Euphemism told me this, I didn't know what to say, because I had never really thought about what it would be like to be someone who goes from, well, I have, but not in the case of like literally blink of an eye, snap of a finger, you're in a home, then you're not. It's more like people talk about, living paycheck to paycheck, making sure that you're wary and cautious of, living within your means or even below your means, because if you live above your means, that can cause you to be in debt, and then debt piles up, and then that can just lead to a whole array of problems. But when he told me this, I was like, I didn't think that there would be any sort of use discrimination. You know what I mean? Because everyone understands, like, all of us are out here on the street or wherever you're at, in the shelter, wherever you may be, and also all of us are using. I didn't understand that there was some sort of hierarchy among what substances you are using. Yeah, that's something I never really understood. And for context, euphemism is a young black man. But even with that being said, it's just understanding your privilege in certain spaces that you're in, and how that may affect how others see you, how you see yourself, and moving forward is definitely something that I definitely want to take into account. I know that I have a privilege as someone who I was able to graduate high school. I'm able to have a job. I'm able to have multiple jobs, actually, and still be able to, move forward. And I have a support system, family members and friends who support me. I have the financial means to, spend money the way that I would like. Obviously not willy-nilly, but I still have, money. I have roof over my head, food on the table, And I know that these are what what someone would consider basic needs, but there are some people who aren't even having these basic needs met. And I think that's a really big problem, especially with the fact that Elon Musk literally just became a trillionaire. That word doesn't even register when you go to type it into a like Word document or some sort of like typing document. It literally thinks that it's a spelling error, because what do you mean you have the amount of wealth that is like literally inconceivable. The fact that $1 million, that's 6 zeros, and then I think a billion is 8. A billion is either 7 or 8. I literally cannot remember. I think it's 8. It that amount of money no one person should have, because at that point it's like, what are you doing with it? Are you investing it? Are you spending it? Are you hoarding it? I'm just confused. I'm really just confused. But that was just something that I never gave much thought to when originally Euphemism told me this, and I was just like, wow. I had no idea that there was a hierarchy even within a community that doesn't necessarily have all of their basic needs met. And with the last part of these experiences that I have, this is from a friend V, who I also met in high school. This may be niche, but when I'm at school, I feel othered because of my appearance and fashion. Going to a PWI, most of the white people have a similar aesthetic. I'm always either too fancy or too casual. I also sometimes become more self-conscious of my lack of experience when it comes to social skills like networking, dating, relationships, being able to go up to someone unfamiliar and ask a question without the fear of being rejected, or without the fear of rejection, excuse me. I think that this is also something that's not unique just to V, but from other people as well. Just because for myself, I also go to a PWI, and there have definitely been instances where I'm like, oh, I didn't know that everyone was wearing jeans today and I'm wearing sweatpants. You know what I mean? Or everyone's dressed up and I'm in, baggy casual clothes. There are just certain instances and environments that I never would have considered dressing a specific way, just because that's not the first thing that I think about. Like, I wake up in the morning and I'm like, okay, I'm up. I can move everything. My mind is working. Okay, cool. Let me brush my teeth, figure out what I need to do for the day, and also put some clothes on my body so I'm not walking outside with no clothes. You know what I mean? So, but I think in terms of speaking on a lack of experience with dating and relationships and the fear of rejection, I think that's another thing that I would say my generation, as in Gen Z, a lot of people are just scared of being perceived as cringe, which I think we should bring cringe back, but I also think we should bring back journaling. I think I know a little too much about people on the internet. Like, you don't even know my last name, and I know a lot of personal and intimate details about your life that I'm not necessarily comfortable with knowing. I don't know how I found out this information. I don't know what exactly pushed you to put this information out on the internet, but I just want you to know that I know it. But I also think journaling would be great, and also a really good way for you to get your thoughts out without necessarily having to broadcast it to the world. But that is just me. I'm also someone who would consider themselves a pretty private person in certain aspects, so that also might just be a personal preference. But bring back journaling, bring back being cringe in an appropriate way, and also bring back life experiences. But in V's case, I do understand being in certain spaces and you're like, okay, so I just completely wore the wrong thing, but I didn't know I was wearing the wrong thing because I didn't know that there was some sort of underlying dress code that no one told me about. So I definitely think that that's not an uncommon experience. So 1000%. And I would also say, in terms of having a lack of experience in social skills, honestly, I feel like some of that stuff comes with time. Other things may come with jobs. And then also a lack of experiences is literally just like, we're still pretty young. We still have a lot of things that we need to go through and grow through. And sometimes things literally don't come up until later. So I think where you're at is where you're meant to be, and you'll make it. This has been the first half of Word to Us on WBCA 102.9, Boston's community radio station. Word to Us is amplifying Black women's voices. And we'll be right back after this short break.
I still playing to your phone, even though I know you want. I've been twisted on you for so long, girl. Yeah. Got me twisted, I could only wait for so long, girl. Waited so long, but we got no time, no.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Word to Us on WBCA 102.9, Boston's community radio station. I'm Kyla-Journey and I spent the first half of the episode talking a little bit about the experiences of people I know and the people that have talked about what they have gone through, where they feel that they are too black in white spaces and too black in white spaces and too white in black spaces. I want to turn a little bit more to the title of this episode, which would be being put in a box, and I want to talk more about the concept of alienation. In this case, when I say alienation, I'm talking about social alienation, which is when a person's feeling disconnected from a group, whether friends, family, or a wider society, with which the individual has an affiliation. So in this case, this is Black people feeling estranged from the Black community because they're too white, and then in the other case, it would be being considered too... Wait, I was about to say the same thing twice. Excuse me. But essentially just feeling... Oh, yes. And then the other instance would be feeling too black in a white space, but not in the sense that the black person wants to be white. They just feel that they're not necessarily blending in, but they're sticking out. Not that they always want to blend in. That's not always the case, but sometimes you just feel like you're a yellow dot of paint on a white wall. So everyone can see you, and you're just hoping to God no one points out the fact that you're there. There are cases, especially among middle school students, teenagers, and young adults, where social alienation can happen intentionally through cliques, groups, clubs, etc. And I think this is something I see a lot at my school. So at UMass Amherst, there are the cultural and student organizations. They're called registered student organizations, or RSOs. And there are dance groups, there are ethnic or heritage groups, there are different things that basically, if you can think about it, we probably have a club for it. But there are certain students who go into these spaces and they have a tendency to only be around, let's say, like, if they're a part of a dance group, they only hang out with, like, the dancers, or they only hang out with the music people if they play an instrument. So in this case, they're not purposely trying to make anyone else feel like they don't belong, but it just so happens that because of who they are spending their time around, they just so happen to, accidentally be casting someone out. And I think, okay, side note, I think friend crushes are a real thing. I think you can genuinely look at someone and go, oh my gosh, they're so cool. I want to be their friend. Like, I have to be their friend. I aspire to be their friend in a healthy way, obviously, not in like a really weird obsessive way, because that's scary. But yes, with that being said, I think that there are good things that come out of clubs and cliques there are good things that come out of clubs and groups, but I think cliques is the one where you have to be a little bit careful, because cliques seem to be more about the popularity or the status of the members rather than finding a common ground among everyone. And this is just from my experience. This could be something that no one else necessarily has experienced or believes in, but yeah, I just think that groups are good. I think clubs are good, especially if you're trying to find people who are most likely like-minded. You'll definitely find that in a cultural group or in a heritage group or a group where everyone is a similar ethnicity, or they come from a background that's like yours, or, you grew up believing in the same things. So that's definitely something that a lot of people can align with. And I think it's a great way to make friends, a great way to stay connected, to understand more about yourself and those around you, and then also how your background and growing up can influence you as an individual. My next thing is talking about the difference between social alienation and social isolation. So in this case, social isolation is a state of complete or near complete lack of contact between an individual and society. It differs from loneliness, which reflects temporary and an involuntary lack of contact with other humans in the world. Social isolation can be an issue for individuals of any age, though symptoms differ by age group. Social isolation has similar characteristics in both temporary instances and for those with a historical lifelong isolation cycle. All types of social isolation can include staying home for lengthy periods of time, having no communication with family, acquaintances, or friends, and/or willingly avoiding any contact with other humans when those opportunities do arise. Now, I'm going to say this, it might sound problematic. I think everyone needs to spend a little bit of time with themselves and understand who they are as an individual so they can better show up in their friendships, in their relationships, in the world overall. However, I do not think that isolation is good. Humans are social beings. We should be around other people. I also believe that friends, family, and those that you choose to have in your life, you chose to have around you for a reason. And even if you are going through something that's really difficult for you, or you're not necessarily sure how you may or may not get through it, there are ways for you to support yourself, and the people that you choose to have in your life are also a part of your support system. And the best thing you can do for yourself if you're in a period when you're like, oh my gosh, this is the hardest thing I've ever had to go through, I don't know what I'm going to do, lean on your support system. Make sure that they understand that you are important to them, and also that they are important to you, and you are important to them, because you never want someone in your life to feel taken for granted or that the friendship is very one-sided, but you do want to let them know, like, hey, I know I go through life and I know you go through life, but I think we should go through life and its hardships together, just so that we don't have to worry about, having a mental health break or a mental health crisis, if it can be either avoided or, the effects are lessened, if that makes sense. So, with that being said, I would also like to say that being alienated or being put in a box, some people might also associate that with imposter syndrome, which I do understand. I do think there are some connections between imposter syndrome and being put in a box, but I think it also depends on each person's experience. Like, you're not necessarily sure about all of the things going on with someone, and obviously everyone's life experience is different. Everyone has a different set of parents. Everyone grows up with a different set of values, blah, 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 blah. There are always certain factors that are going to differ with every single person. But we all get one life to live. We all have this unique experience called life, and we get these beautiful things called experiences. And in order for us to understand who we are as individuals and as people, we have to go through things. And we also need to understand that sometimes going through an uncomfortable period or a period of change is bringing you to the next level and maybe even a better version of who you're meant to and supposed to be as a person. So on that note, I would also like to say being put in a box, to me, not all the time, but sometimes, is when someone looks at you, the way you talk, the way you behave, the way you interact with others, and make an assumption based on what they observe. I think there are certain things you can assume about someone and it's not bad. Not all assumptions are bad, but I think there are certain things that you shouldn't assume about someone just based off of first glance or first observation. However, I am a firm believer that when someone shows you who they are, believe them. When someone is going through a rough time with someone in their life, notice the language that they use. Notice how they treat the person after they either forgive them or let them back into their life or whatever the situation may be. Be wary of that. Be cautious of that. Take notes. I'm not saying you need to be suspiciously looking at everyone around you and going, how are you treating me today? But I think it's very important to understand that some people do not always have their friends or loved ones' interests at heart. And some people are genuinely, truly selfish. And you can protect yourself and keep yourself guarded, but you can also still be vulnerable. And I think those two really flip-flop back and forth, and you can figure it out with each individual person, because obviously every person is different. So you'll have different levels of friendships and different relationships with different people in your life. A person's habits and how they consistently carry themselves are more telling of their character than a regular day-to-day conversation you might have with them. And this is something else I believe too. There are certain habits of some people that they simply cannot break, and that might be a deal breaker for you. And that's fine. Stand your ground, stand on your expectations, and stand on your standards, especially if they're to a degree where you know you're not asking too much, you just know what you want and you know what you don't want. Stand 10 toes down on that. Affirm the fact that you know this, and if the person isn't meeting you where you're at, or if the person isn't trying to meet you where you're at, cut it. Because there's no way you should be doing anything and it feels a majority one-sided, and you've communicated to the other person or you have expressed to the other person how you feel, and they haven't even tried to make you feel that they're attempting to change, not even just for you, but also for themselves. I am a firm believer that obviously everyone in your life is changing you. Not everyone is going to change you for the better, but there are certain things that some people may bring up or bring to you, and you're just like, yeah, no, that's not going to fly with me. And that's okay. That's genuinely fine. But I think that a lot of people have a tendency to really want the people in their support system. Like when you have someone, you're like, oh my gosh, like this is great. I have them. I'm going to hold on to them. But sometimes people are in your life for seasons, and that is okay. And it is okay to let some people go. Some people may come back. Some people may not, but that is fine. And with that being said, you're listening to Word to Us, WBCA 102.9 FM, Boston's community radio station. Word to Us is amplifying Black women's voices, and I'm your host, Kyla-Journey. And with my last general note before we wrap up this episode, I would like to connect back to my very first podcast episode where I talked about tackling imposter syndrome. Like I said, I believe that there's a difference between being made to feel like you don't belong versus having to deal with it internally. I think being made to feel like you don't belong is being put in a box, and I think having to deal with something internally has to do more with imposter syndrome. And also, like I said, in this case, I believe imposter syndrome versus being put in a box depends person to person, and someone might view them as more intertwined, and someone might see them as two different concepts. But with that being said, learning something new is always a little uncomfortable, and being somewhere new is also uncomfortable. And in periods of your life when you are growing or experiencing change or really big life events, there is always going to be an underlying feeling of uncomfortableness and feeling like you don't belong. But if you're in a space and you know that you did the work to be there, you deserve to be there, and so you should stay. And really, like, obviously, if you're in a toxic work environment, leave. Do not put your mental health at risk for a job. Never. I will never stand for that. You are the only person that you have, and you have to take care of you before you attempt to take care of anyone else. So if you're literally being put at a mental or a physical risk, do not stay. Do not stay. Find better for yourself. Get out if you can. And if you can't, continue to work and do what you need to do to get yourself in a better position. 1000%. I will stand on that. But I also want people to understand that the experience of being someone who tiptoes the gray area of being too white in black spaces and too black and white spaces, as someone who is either visibly black or visibly multiracial or things like that, those are experiences that I believe will continue to happen, unfortunately, just because of how certain social spaces are built. But I think that when you get to a place and a point in your life when you know who you are, you know why you're there, and you know what you need to do to get yourself to where you want to be, and you know who you are as an individual, I believe that you'll be set for life. And with that being said, thank you so much for tuning in. You've been listening to Word to Us. Thank you for listening to this conversation, opening your mind to things you may not have considered before, and giving me your time. Take care of yourself, stay healthy, and remember, this is a word to us. Share it when you feel ready. Let me know if there's anything you want to hear from me or any guests. Peace and love, Kyla-Journey.